Hi, welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George, and today we're going to explore um, the idea of overcoming our reluctance to overcome the illusion of free will. Because what happens is a lot of times we'll understand the logic, the reason why we don't have a free will, but we like to have a free will, and that's actually something we're preconditioned to do. It's not our choice. We're hedonic creatures, and we've actually been programmed to cherish this idea of free will. But all right. So before we get into this, I just want to go briefly into the purpose of the show, and then just briefly go into a definition of free will and its alternative, which is the reality of our human will, which is causal will or deterministic predetermined will. Okay, the reason this show is important is that the illusion of free will causes a lot of unnecessary harm. You know, for example, when we have, let's say we have a 2-year-old, does something wrong, we don't ascribe free will to that 2-year-old, and because of that, excuse me, we will treat that 2-year-old with compassion, with understanding. We'll say, 2-year-old couldn't help themselves. But what happens is then when it comes to older children, adults, whatever, we say, well, you know, you did this of your own free will, and you deserve to be punished. You're bad, you're evil, whatever. And we do this to ourselves. We do something wrong. Oh, I did something wrong. I feel guilty. I'm going to suffer the guilt of having done something wrong. Okay, and so it causes a lot of unnecessary blame, guilt, aggression. Now, before I go further, I'm not going to say, I wouldn't recommend that we, do without kind of a personal morality of, just, in other words, like, just because we don't have a free will doesn't give us license to do whatever we want, and we'll go into that later. But, but anyway, that's I think why the show is important. We could create a much better world by transcending this very, very pervasive illusion. It's an illusion that our whole civilization is based on. Our whole criminal justice system, our whole system of rewards and punishments, and socioeconomically, personally. Okay, and so to briefly describe what people mean when they say free will, it's simply that that nothing that I'm not in control of is compelling me to decide whatever I decide. That's the key. That like that I'm in complete control of what I decide and what I don't decide. And so that means, like, for example, with the unconscious by definition is not in our control. We're not even aware of it. So, if we have, and if the unconscious is always awake, which it is, it's always like the unconscious is what makes our heart beat and our lungs and our whole body, it just runs the body. And naturally it takes, it's where we have all our memories stored. It's where even our thought processes, how we process information is stored. These kinds of, and so like, basically we can't make any decision without the unconscious. And so naturally, if we have an unconscious that's not in our control, you can see how that would make free will impossible. But that's the idea. People who say free will is like we can make a decision that is completely in our control. Nothing that is not in our control is compelling it. And so, we can see through various ways how that's not the case. Okay, so naturally we have a causal will. We have a will that is subject to causality. That whatever decision we make has a cause, and then that cause has a cause, and that cause has a cause. And, the causes go back in time, and there's this causal regression of cause and effect that leads to before we were born, before the planet was created, before the sun was created. It's easy to see how like events in the past through this cause and effect process ultimately led to what's this movie. It's like we're acting everything out, and it's that's another reason I'm doing this show actually, because like it's so mind-boggling that nature. All right, in other words, we have been predetermined by nature, God, call it whatever you want, to have this illusion of free will. Okay, that's we can't but do it, but it's just like so opposite to the way things are that even just for that reason alone, I think it would be beneficial for humanity to really understand, our true nature, nature of our will. Okay, now, all right, these shows are online. Okay, if you go to causalconsciousness.com, you can see this show and some previous episodes. Okay, or you can Google "Exploring the Illusion of Free Will." If you put it in quotes, you'll probably find it easier. All right, so with this thing, like we're gonna talk about overcoming our reluctance to overcome the illusion of free will. Here's the thing. Sometimes, all right, I want to start with this. It's more than an illusion. Some people, for example, understand logically, rationally, that free will is impossible. They understand that we have this unconscious that makes free will impossible. They understand that we have this causality that makes things impossible. They understand that even if things were random, which random is really an incoherent kind of term, but if things happen without cause, that's not going to help the cause of free will, because if our decisions aren't caused, then they're certainly not caused by our free will. Okay, so you have a lot of people who understand this, but they still are compelled by fate to believe in free will. They can't let the notion go. So naturally you can't blame them, but that's the reality. And so, the point here is like when a belief, when an illusion gets to the point of that it's an illusion, but you still believe in it, it's no longer an illusion. It becomes a delusion at that time. So basically, our whole humanity, except maybe a few people, whatever, is completely deluded regarding the very nature of our human will. And I want to, for example, I want to just explain what I mean by delusion. Okay, so here's there's these two lines, okay? And, if you were to ask yourself which line is longer, it seems like the one on top. A is longer, okay? So, and that's the illusion. Now, if you measure the lines with a ruler and you determine, oh my God, they're exactly the same distance. I haven't measured them, so I'm not exactly how long they are, but they are. That's what delusion is. Now, so if after having measured those lines, you still continue to assert that the top line is longer than the bottom line, that's where an illusion becomes a delusion, a delusion. So it's really, I should title the show "Exploring no, it's got to be the illusion of free will," because a lot of people, the fact is most people just haven't even thought about this. There's this term free will and people just assume it, but people haven't explored it enough to really understand how free will is impossible. That's that's the purpose of the show. All right. So now why do we continue to believe in free will? Okay, one of the main reasons is people believe, well, gee, I mean, if I was a robot, if I was an actor, life would have no meaning. I mean, everything's a movie. We're just nothing's up to us. We can't take credit for anything, And all right, that's understandable. Incidentally, we're predetermined to feel that way. It's not our choice. But I don't know. What's the answer to that? I think the answer is generally in the world, we tend to be religious. We tend to believe in God or higher power. So if we don't want to see ourselves as robots, as puppets, as these kind of completely programmed beings and everything is a movie, another way to look at it is God's physicality is manifest through us. We tend to believe that that God, exists outside of space and time, outside of the universe. He transcends time. But that doesn't make sense in a sense, because, like, for example, one of the definitions of God is that he's omnipresent or everywhere. So I think a clearer understanding of God is that God is everything. And so we're a part of God. We're like, so in a sense, we are instruments of God. I think that's probably a way of seeing this that most people can relate to, because it has a religious context. We're vehicles for God's will. And so when we see it from that perspective, it's not that it just restores our nobility. We're not just mere robots. We're not puppets. We are like the physical manifestation of God, okay? God expresses him, herself through us. All right, that should be a lot more palatable to people. It should make understanding that we don't have a free will easier to accept. Okay, but then there's another kind of reason people are kind of afraid to believe that we don't have a free will. They believe that, well, if we acknowledge and accept and understand that we don't have a free will and act according to that, then there's no personal morality. In other words, you can't hold us accountable for anything. We can't take credit for the good we do, and we can't blame ourselves or each other for the bad that we do. And naturally, it's an understandable fear. People are afraid that, my God, if everybody understands we don't have a free will, everybody's just going to do whatever they want, and say, well, you can't blame me. I don't have a free will. And as a matter of fact, there's this guy, Saul Smilansky. He's a philosopher. He actually wrote a book, which I've got to remember the title of it, but basically he understands that free will is impossible. It's an illusion. It's just like, doesn't exist. But his perspective is that we shouldn't tell people because of this fear that people have that, if we know the true nature of our will, that we're actually instruments of God rather than, God's ourselves. Because when you think about it, if we have a free will, that means we are creating our thoughts. We are the author of our thoughts. And, a good understanding of God is like God is the only thing, entity that creates things. But the idea is, like, people believe, if we relinquish our belief in free will, there will be anarchy. No, and I'll tell you why. Because we're programmed, okay? We're hardwired in certain ways to act in certain ways. One of the ways we're hardwired is we have a hedonic principle. Freud explained this as the pleasure principle. There's been other kinds of explanations of it in biology and other sciences. The idea is that we human beings are hardwired, compelled to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And naturally, sometimes we'll undergo a certain amount of pain for, let's say, to assuage our conscience, and so it gets a little complicated. But anyway, the idea is that because we are hardwired, our basic motivation in life is to seek pleasure and avoid pain, we're not going to let people just get away with claiming, well, I don't have a free will, so I can do with it. We're not going to allow ourselves. And